Okay, I think we are ready to get started. Thank you everyone for joining me. My name is Suchi. The topic that we are going to cover today is the K-12 strategies for developing independent learners. This is Autism Month, and this is a cause that's very near and dear to my heart. I have a kiddo who's going to be 13 in a week who is on the spectrum. It's been a journey, but I'm very excited about specifically this topic because I do know that, parents, especially when you get an early diagnosis, it can be surprising because the stages are so different. And we are here to demystify that. So with us, we have a really great panel. And I just wanted to run through the agenda quickly. So the first thing is we're going to do a quick introduction, and then you'll be meeting our experts. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. We have previously asked we have previously asked parents to answer a few questions that they thought were important to them. So we're going to go through those questions, but please ask your live questions. The ones that maybe you are probably going to address are the ones that might be, relatable to the general population or the general audience in this case. But any questions that don't get answered in the webinar will absolutely be posted in a blog post, or we will reach out to you later to get your question answered. So definitely put your live questions in, and we will go through our Q&A as time fits. Okay, so the reason, again, this is just such an interesting topic is that the rate of diagnosis has gone up by 64%. So in 2024, it was one in, I want to say, it was one in like almost 100, and now it's like 1 in 36 in terms of who has autism. And I think I want to point out that this is also for kids who are only over 8. So they're not really counting the population of kids who are between, say, 0, typically you don't get diagnosed at 0, but maybe between 1 and 7. And so I think the numbers are actually a lot higher, and that this is no longer, something that's unique or has a specific kind of stereotype. Like I keep telling everyone, you've seen one person who's autistic or on the spectrum, you've only met one person who's autistic or on the spectrum. It's just that everyone has a unique profile. And the thing that you can expect from this webinar is, we have behavior, life, and education experts, and we will address questions that are, again, relatable to the audience. Any specific questions that, even if they came in early, please ask them. We will make a note of them, and we will let you know when and where the questions will be answered, so you will have access to them. And the last one is, again, I'm just repeating myself, but please ask questions in the Zoom chat. And we have Jessica on standby helping to type away as well. Okay, who is Learnfully? Who are we? So we essentially are a personalized learning solution for neurodiverse learners. And the reason I started this company, over 3 years ago, is I myself got diagnosed with ADHD about 5 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago. And what really kind of struck me is that we just learn differently. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing less than. It's just that there are certain things that kids or adults who are neurodiverse get really easily. And there are certain things that are really hard for the rest of the population, that are really easy for the rest of the population, we don't get as easily. And that doesn't mean you're never going to get it. It just means that if there was a specific set of instructions, then you would know and you would get the same, and you would achieve your goal of understanding that concept and reaching the goal. But in order to do that, you need to understand what your starting point is. So that's the one thing that we keep saying is that, yes, there are plenty of solutions out there that are evidence-based, where if you go to them, they'll give you multisensory reading curriculums and multisensory math. But what is really, really, really important is understanding your learning profile or understanding your kid's learning profile. Like we have probably spent thousands of dollars, on psychologist reports, And I can tell you that countless times we've had families come in and say, yeah, we have the psychologist report, but I still don't know how it translates into the classroom. That is extremely important. We spent 1/3 of our lives, and our kids spent a lot of time at school or learning. And it's extremely important to understand where they stand in terms of their executive functioning and what's coming easily and what's going to be hard. And the reason, again, this is important is, when my kid was in second grade, he was really good at math. And then all of a sudden, it started becoming challenging and I didn't understand that. I was like, I knew he had a diagnosis. And then I learned that, oh, actually, comprehension, reading is not hard, decoding is not hard for kids on the spectrum. Comprehending it may be hard, and word problems, especially, can be trickier. And that starts in like third, fourth, fifth grade. And so you essentially have these milestones that you reach where there's a new challenge that you have to work on. The good news is with the right tools, they're overcoming their challenges. But the bad news is that when you reach a certain milestone, there's another challenge waiting for you up until the age of, 24 or something like that, depending on the kid. So with that, I want you to meet our experts. Sam, we're very excited to have her. She is an adult who got diagnosed with ASD and will be giving her firsthand experience on what it was like and what worked and what didn't work. And then we have Sophie, who is a certified BCBA educator and just has a passion for learning and also helping kids with the learning process. So we're very excited to have her. And then you have a very familiar face, Sheila, who is our SVP of education and has had decades of experience as a school principal, is neurodiverse herself, and has kids who are neurodiverse and who are thriving. And so she's been through the process, she's been through the ringer, and she's here to help answer your questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Sam. So Sam, would you mind taking a couple of minutes to talk about yourself?
Hi, I'm Sam. Thank you guys so much for having me. Yeah, my experience from very start on, I knew that I was different. I always wanted to be a horse. I knew that I could feel, see, smell, hear, touch, experience everything 10 times deeper than everyone around me. That shut me down and in the beginning. Now I get to use that for my impact. I get to use my sensory to help other people with stretching, range of motion. I get to use my sensory in kickboxing and instead of be scared of what's coming at me and have those meltdowns that I would have as a kid, I get to work through those challenges and finally be proud of myself and get to do something that used to shut me down. Now it is a skill. And why I'm speaking about it now, I didn't know what I had all growing up. I didn't figure it out until 2019. And even then I still was like, are you sure like this is what it is? And now that I've like fully accepted myself and accepted my quirks, I just don't want anyone else to live in a box or live trapped. And I want them to be themselves and know that yeah, what shuts you down, you can actually use for good. And I just hope I can be a light and help anyone that needs it.
Love it. Thank you so much, Sam. With that, Sheila, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So my experience was that I have been an educator since my own children were diagnosed. I was really frustrated with the education system because they couldn't figure out how to reach my kids. And I couldn't understand why teachers couldn't reach my kids because I thought at that time that they were trained in all things neurodiversity, only to find out that they really do just need tools and they aren't necessarily trained. So it drove me to go back to school. My neurodiversity superpower is definitely once I'm fixated on something, I most definitely go for it. So I did accomplish 4 degrees in 10 years and got my doctorate in my passion towards supporting educators and families to never experience what I did with my own 3 boys. So that's what I do, why I do what I do. And as Suchi said, happy to report all of them are thriving. Made it through the other side with some gray hair. So just real quick, want to go over some foundational skills. This is so important to understand, and especially for families of neurodiverse learners, because oftentimes we ourselves struggle in some of these areas. So it's very challenging for us to support our neurodiverse learners when we may ourselves have some challenges. So in terms of being on the spectrum, some very clear executive functioning disorders that you may see in your kids are struggling with flexible thinking, just being really inflexible with thought and action. And this actually does affect their learning quite a bit, because if you only see one right way to do something, it can be a struggle in math, in reading, in writing. So you will see it in life and in their learning. Planning, prioritization, and organization can also be a struggle for learners. And then this is also often a place where families themselves may struggle. So I remember really specifically the kids, teachers saying, you need to organize their backpack and make sure they're coming to school organized. And I'm like, Jesus, I can't even get myself organized. Have you seen my desk?
Oh,
So just telling a parent, like, keep them organized, keep the plan, you know, that was a struggle for me with ADHD. So for me to support them was really a struggle. Impulse control affects all areas of learning as well, and obviously behavior. And working memory can be a struggle with kids on the spectrum. So these are just some highlighted areas. Obviously, there could be challenges in any of the executive functioning areas.
I agree. I will tell you that my kid's working memory is way better than mine. He will even say, remember what happened on October 6, 2019? I'm like, no, I don't. And he's like, well, you were there. And he would get all frustrated. So completely agree that the profile varies, but all the more reason why it's very important for you to understand the profile so you can understand how they learn. So thank you so much for that, Sheila. We are now going to go to Sophie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me as well. A little bit of background about me. So I am a precision teacher, instructional designer, and behavior therapist. And I really work at the intersection of education and therapy. So it's really about showing children that they can be successful, that they can persevere in the face of failure, and to get curious about it so that they can ultimately blossom into lifelong learners. We all know that learning, Sheila clearly knows this, that learning does not stop when you're 18. It keeps going, and it can keep going as long as you want it to. So what I specialize in is teaching flexible and abstract language that provides the foundation for any type of academic competency, emotional regulation, and comprehension across contexts. And I landed in this work somewhat accidentally, but if I look back and I think about my childhood, I didn't have great teachers. I very quickly learned how to feel unintelligent, afraid of failure, and got a lot of language about not being good enough or smart enough, and that really got in my way. I know now that thoughts like that for anyone are normal. Everyone experiences that. It's just part of being human, but it's what you do with them that matters. They don't have to get in the way. They don't have to function that way. So you can actually not necessarily ignore them, but you learn to live with them, and you learn to focus on what's important to you, what's there in the present moment. I'm currently working on a PhD proposal in all of this. So that's quite exciting. There's not a ton of research in these areas, so I'm looking forward to contributing to that as well.
Awesome. Let's see, and then next slide. Okay, it's all you, Sophie.
Okay, all right. Little disclaimer: what you'll see with with all of these different sections across the different age groups is that there's overlap, because what's happening in pre-K to kindergarten is building the foundation for all of the skills that come later as well. So really, it's cumulative. And if you think back to the different components in the executive function control center, all of these skills start in pre-K. They just look a little different. The context is different. So also, this all applies to any child. They don't have to have autism for these things to be important. So what you'll find in pre-K to kindergarten, children are being exposed to loud and noisy, busy environments, and they're still expected to do the little pieces of work and the worksheets that they're meant to do. They are beginning to work on emotional regulation, but really in the context of communications. They're going to notice that they're not feeling good, and they need to learn how to communicate for what they need. And so that's where these early problem-solving skills start. There's a ton of group learning in pre-K and kindergarten, a lot of group time, morning meetings, that sort of thing. And then children are getting exposed to these early literacy, numeracy, fine motor, and play skills as well. So that's all blossoming. And then as well, a little bit of a note on the language. A lot of it is beginning with children following instructions and learning how to organize based on the feedback and the instructions that they're receiving from the adults around them. But ultimately, by the time you get to 9th to 12th grade, you want to see these young adults coming up with their own instructions, their own rules about things, and tracking their own behavior. So that's really where that self-monitoring piece comes in from executive function. Okay, thank you. All right, then we move into foundational literacy, decoding, comprehension, and vocabulary, and also mathematical concepts. So these are all the basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, moving into fractions, so on and so forth. Yes, there is a distinction between decoding. A lot of children with autism, have great reading capabilities when it comes to just decoding what they're reading. And families are thrilled about it. It's absolutely wonderful. And it's just one piece of what we have to do when we read. There's a whole other level of complexity with the language development. And that's specifically in terms of language abstraction. Things just get more complicated, more abstract. We're not talking about things that are here in the present moment. We're talking about the future. We're now having to imagine a story. And that's going to trip up a lot of children, not just those on the spectrum either. And again, following instructions combines with these abstract concepts. So really all of these skills are combining. And then, oh no, you're fine.
Okay.
And then by the time you get to, no, this is great. You're keeping me on pace. And then by the time you get to 5th to 8th grade, that now you're really looking at application. So ideally they have the foundational skills and now they're applying them. Now these skills are combining with other skills that they've learned, perhaps to perform new things that haven't been explicitly taught. And you really want to create an instructional environment where kids are getting these generative learning outcomes where not everything has to be explicitly taught. But that does take some careful scope and sequence and planning on the part of the instructor or the teacher. And yes, things get more complex with negotiation, assertiveness. I'm sure that's a pain for a lot of parents, but if your children are doing that, those are good language skills to have. You just want to, funnel them in the appropriate direction. Not everything can be a negotiation. And then by the time you get to blossoming adulthood, 9th to 12th grade, then you really are looking at as much independence as possible. So really, these young adults ought to be managing their time well, their projects, communicating, managing their levels of stress, recognizing what kind of healthy outlets there are for those types of stressful situations as well. Exercise being a big one. MMA, awesome. I do CrossFit. That's very good for, for stress management. And again, the language that's needed to be successful at this age is really abstract and really complex. And we can all, you know, if you've been through university, we're all well aware of how confusing language can be.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you so much for that. Just like it's confusing to find the unmute button. But yeah, I think that is a great summary, and it prepares me a little bit in terms of what to expect, and it has helped me not be surprised that, okay, now I know what my kid is going to struggle with. So that was super helpful. With that, we're going to jump right into the audience Q&A. So the very first question that got ranked number 1 is, how do I figure out what supports my child needs most at home and or at school? So Sophie, I would love for you to take it on, and then Sheila and Sam to follow in that order.
Okay. All right. There are three main points. And these are the points that, this is the perspective that I take anytime I meet a family. So you always want to return to first principles, get back to the basics. And if you have identified that there is a problem, the first place to start is to ask if your child has mastered these necessary foundational skills across all the developmental areas and contexts. And this is not age specific. This doesn't mean that if they haven't mastered X, Y, and Z by the time they're in high school, that this is necessarily, you know, the be all end all. It just isn't. But it gives you a place, it gives you a perspective to think about, okay, I'm going to wonder about what else they need to learn and how to build those skills to fluency. Now, in precision teaching, we have a long history of evidence-based, what we call performance aims in academic context. Specifically, the emotional regulation is a little bit more complex, of course, and context specific. The second thing is you might have a child who does too much of something. And this is a complaint that I often hear from families about screen time, social media use, internet safety. And a lot of what I do involves developing really context specific and individualized instruction and interventions. But just generally, it can be quite helpful to develop some rules and boundaries over what is expected when you're online or you're on social media, what's okay, what isn't, to be in a position where you're cultivating this open dialogue with your children so that they feel comfortable enough coming to you with the weird and the awkward and the uncomfortable things that they might not really understand, but they recognize something's not right here. So you always want to keep that conversation going. Children also have to learn how to accept being bored. So that can be a thing to work on as well. Boredom is not a problem. Boredom is an opportunity. You could do something other than being on a screen. And then, of course, I will belabor the point, but exercise. There's so much that, so many problems that disappear when children have enough exercise. And then the last point is you might have a child who has learned to like or to want to seek some sort of interaction with you that perhaps you don't like. And maybe it's just not really workable in the long run, and it's not a way of interacting with people that you want them to pursue. So that might be a good place to just find some guidance on how to reset, reestablish what the expectations are, and start to build again that relationship, identify your family values, and then go from there.
I love it. I think my favorite was the screen time one, but then I realized I can't live without my phone. It's like, how do I lead by example? So that's a tough one. Sheila, do you want to take that one as well, really quickly? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. All right. So yeah, for me, for what I did mostly with my own kiddos was looking for areas where they were dysregulated and looking for areas in opportunities of where they were struggling, but then looking at the areas that were their strengths as well. And so when I think about supports, I think about, okay, we can support using their areas of strength. And so it's really about closely monitoring. I think, as Sophie said, it's really important and imperative to understand. So what are the challenge areas? What are the areas of strengths? Build the supports built on this, building upon the strengths. And communication is key with the school. So if we're talking about home and school supports, you want to make sure there's communication between the two. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit further in some other questions. But one thing that I cannot stress enough to learners and teachers is that you can't fix everything all at once. So throwing 20 supports out there and giving them to the kids all at the same time, a list of accommodations, when you haven't really figured out which ones are appropriate and which ones do work, they take time and they take communication, and always asking the learner. Even as young as kindergarten, a kiddo can tell you what's working and what isn't working. But consistency is key. And so figuring out the supports, building off of strengths, keeping consistent to determine if it is going to work or isn't. Trying for 1 week is not trying. Trying for 1 week is band-aiding a gushing wound. So
No, that's actually a really good point. Even as a parent, I had to learn to prioritize. And it wasn't like prioritizing, the list of prioritization wasn't always clear. It was, they both looked urgent. In fact, 5 of them looked urgent, 5 of them looked important. And so forcing myself to say, okay, I'm going to start with that one made all the difference on the planet, but it is a hard step to take because it's very difficult to say breathing is more important than eating. It's like it literally was like that. So essentially, yes, I completely agree with that one. Sam, super excited to hear your take on it. You've been through this. What supports do you think would have helped you, make things better?
Okay, so much. But to keep it short, right, I wish I would have gotten asked. With my reading, it was organizing the words, organizing the letters, not being able to remember it. I couldn't figure out how to say that to my parent, and my parent didn't have the resources of how to ask me, like, how come I cannot read or cannot remember what I'm reading? So having different resources like an audio while you're reading, or bouldering the first couple letters, like asking them, hey, instead of like, go read this book over and over, what is it? What is in front of you? Is it too fast? My brain was always going too fast, faster than what was in front of me. So, hey, let's just slow it down. Let's read one word by word, or draw a picture of what I just read, or just simply asking that child, how come? What is the rock that's in front of you, so that I can help you move the rock? Simply asking them so that they can tell you. Or yeah, does that make any sense?
Oh my God, that was that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. That made a lot of sense.
And taking a break, doing that reward afterwards, going outside and doing it, giving yourself a reward afterwards or before. I love that. Exercise before you do your homework. Figuring out what works for them. Maybe it's not just reading, just like that. You need that auditory, you need that picture. Finding out what works for them, not what works for you, and then going with that will make the huge difference.
Love it. That was very well said. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
so there's so much brilliance here, and we will continue on that path. So the next question, how can I effectively communicate with my child's teacher and school staff about their progress and needs? So Sheila, since you have been through the ringer on this, both as a parent and a principal or a school admin, I'd love for you to start with that one.
yeah. I think for me, I learned this kind of the hard way, because I think at first I went in like a bull in a china shop. I was just so frustrated. I'm like, why aren't you helping my kids? What's wrong with you? only to find out that really 75% of teachers say they don't have the knowledge and the resources. They don't know what they don't know. So I was probably on the opposite side of communication, where more like 83% of teachers say, hey, parents aren't coming to me and communicating. I was definitely part of that other 17%. I was always there saying, here's what they need, here's what they want, but it was about me educating myself. And so I would say once they got into special education, and those teachers really did understand, I built partnerships with those teachers because they understood what my kids needed and I understood what my kids needed. And so we worked as a team to come up with the goals. I didn't leave it just up to the educators to come up with goals. I took part in that as an active participant in their IEPs. Whereas I think a lot of times families think the educators are the experts. They are the experts in education, but you're the expert in your child, and you can never forget that. And so building a rapport, having ongoing communication, and really being clear on what goals they're working on and how you can support that same goal at home, because it takes a community and it takes generalization of skills for them to embed the skills in their everyday life. And so really working, I always start, when I was an administrator in a school, I would always start with, we're here as as a community for your child towards success. And so we're here as a team, and we're going to make decisions as a team, and we need to constantly communicate in order to achieve success for your kiddo. Takes a village. And we always had that mentality when I was an educator, when I was an administrator, and as a parent. And that's when you start seeing real progress, because it's sort of triangulated data. They're getting what they need in all areas of their lives.
Yeah, I love it, especially because even if you have an IEP or a 504, they don't always get implemented because the teachers, certain IEPs, yes, but especially 504s and some IEPs, not all the goals get implemented. So it's very, very important to not be surprised, at the end of the year where you're like, what, you were only working on one goal? Like, I didn't know about that. So definitely the frequency of communication, believe it or not, most educators that I found, well, like I was always like, oh my God, I'm like probably painful, but they welcomed it because they wanted that feedback. So I completely agree with you on that.
Absolutely.
Sophie, Sam, anything to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
All right, perfect. Sam, okay, why don't we move on to the next question then? So the next one is, what executive functioning skills should my elementary school age child be focusing on? So with that, Sophie, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Yes. I have to say my answer to this somewhat groups the next two slides together as well. Like I said before, these skills that are learned in pre-K to kindergarten, it's all cumulative. You're always building on what the children can do. It's the context and the content that's changing as children are progressing through school. And also through the types of social interactions that they're having too. So it's all of it together. So really you're looking at these EF skills in the context of what's going on in the elementary school aged context. With foundational literacy, comprehension, and math. I'd recommend starting, if you can, if your child is willing to use some sort of a visual planner, or if they can write in their own planner themselves, that's wonderful. But really get into the practice of every day you're noticing what's going on around you, what you need to do. And it doesn't have to be throughout the entire day. Don't do it to death. But pick a few things that children can take some ownership over. And you might be quite surprised by the sense of responsibility and the enjoyment that they have in this new autonomy, where they get to manage a little section of their time. So much of education is, it's all coming down from the adult, and it doesn't so often go the other way. from the child up, and it really should, because it is to their benefit to have more say in what's going on. As well, you can practice emotional regulation in the context of failing. Failing, like I said earlier, should be a point of curiosity. It's just practice. You're just practicing skills and practicing for life, and it doesn't stop. Even in the context of some bigger exam or bigger test, it's not, the world's not going to end. It's just another data point, another thing that you can learn from. And then as well, children ought to, if they have the language skills, to practice naming their internal states. Now, I know that for some children, that's very difficult to identify where in their bodies these feelings are happening, and then to notice them. And if they're really, really tough feelings, they're not going to want to notice them, and that will be a challenge in and of itself. But it's good to get a little bit of exposure to that too.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, I think I will say though, when you're going through something tough with your kid, just be prepared. Prepare yourself to kind of be calm and emotionally regulated as well while they're having those big feelings. Because sometimes when I would start something late at night, I'd be like, big mistake. I should have done it on a Sunday after lunch when no one's hungry and we're all caffeinated and ready to go. So, but I love that. And we have done that, and that has made a huge difference. So totally makes sense.
Yes, and you know what, to that point, parents in general should be kinder to themselves. They've got the toughest job in the world, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's just what you do with these mistakes. They're not the be all end all. They're just more data points, more learning. You're growing as a parent as your child is growing into an adult.
That's true. Love it. So the next transition is just into middle school. For this one, I think, Sophie, do you want to get started? And then we'll have Sheila and Sam. Would love to hear your perspective, because middle school is when things start getting hard. So yeah, take it away, Sophie.
Yes. Yeah, this is often the time when teachers really expect a lot of independence with bringing the homework home, doing it at home, and bringing it back to school the next day. And that has to be the biggest battle, I think, in that type of organization. I mean, there are so many things that go into that sequence of events. And of course, there's a period of sleep in between the starting point and the finishing point. So that is something that I would recommend practicing earlier iterations of those skills in elementary school. Maybe it's with something else, maybe it's the lunchbox, or it's the snacks, take some ownership over some things that you're bringing to and from different places. And then also more self-monitoring is going to happen in middle school, and it's going to be tougher. The academic content is getting harder, the concepts are getting more abstract, and then the application of those concepts as well is also becoming more difficult. So it's like I said, it's always good to begin as much as you can earlier on, so that you can set your children up for as much success as possible.
That makes sense. Sheila, so we've had a few questions coming in, and related to this, one of the questions was, well, and paraphrasing, in elementary school, you have one teacher. In middle school, you start having different teachers. And who would you go to because I think that's when you kind of start trying to wonder what's going on, right? So yes, we are the expert, but we're the expert maybe on them at home, not necessarily at school. So what are some strategies that we could use to maybe not necessarily be experts, but feel like we have a handle and are not being surprised by what's happening in middle school?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically there's a caseworker. So if your child has a 504 or an IEP, there's going to be a caseworker. So that would typically be your point of contact. And the reason you want to have a very, 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 very close relationship with that person, and sometimes it's an administrator, so it could be assistant principal, could be a teacher, could be special ed teacher, but that that person can and will be your eyes and ears when you're not at school. And so I was at that was the hard lesson I had to learn once I got my kiddos in the middle and high school, was that it was very difficult for me to go and articulate to another teacher, hey, you should be doing this, or why aren't we working on that, or how are the goals being integrated within the lessons? None of that was going to actually work if it was coming from me as the parent. When it came from the caseworker, they were able to go in throughout the school day and monitor these things. And that's something we wouldn't be able to do. So that's most definitely the person that you would want to identify really early in.
Got it. What about for private schools? Like, do they typically have caseworkers? Would that be a guidance counselor?
It's not necessarily a guidance counselor, but there usually would be somebody that is monitoring accommodations. And so they might call it something different in a private school, but there's somebody monitoring the accommodations one way or another.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. It's like in some cases it was the vice principal and stuff like that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Sam, would love to hear, your perspective on what middle school was like and what executive functioning skills were kind of getting in your way and what really helped you.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always trying to get better at my executive functioning skills. But keeping it simple, wearing my favorite shirt to do that test, bringing my comfort food that day to school to do that test, prepping myself the day before, doing something fun the day before, doing something fun that morning, watching my favorite movie, putting yourself into a meditative state so that you can actually get the things done.
I
Yeah,
love that. I want to do that as an adult. No,
it's super helpful, and it's like the reward before and during and after. And it makes what you're going through less bigger. And if you have your comfort things with you, you can get through 98% of the things.
No, I love that. And that actually makes sense. And so my kid doesn't always know that. And of course, his choice would probably be, can I just watch 8 hours of TV before the test taking day? But you're absolutely right. Like having some strategies and like, or maybe having something to look forward to, like, hey, I'll take you out for ice cream after this test is done, is maybe all they need to get a little bit of boost so their nervousness is down. So that makes sense.
Yeah, just changing what it is so that you can get through it instead of it go over you.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Very cool. What do you think of, maybe we can start with you over here, Sam. What about high school? What was that like, and what were your executive functioning skills?
So high
were they-
school, sorry.
No, go
High
ahead.
school, it got a lot better for me. I had cheerleading and gymnastics. I had a group of people that were different than me, but they were ditzy. So it was like I went from being alone trying to figure things out by myself to having a pack of animals all figuring it out together, and having something that I was good at gave me the confidence to be good at stuff that I was not good at. And yeah, just having that support and backup. And it's not someone that was like a teacher or a tutor trying to like tell me what to do with the executive functioning. It was other people that were also struggling with it, and I could get through it with them together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Sophie, do you ever hear from parents where the struggle is real in terms of kids want to be independent, and especially if they're on the spectrum, we kind of have a hard time letting that go. So, any thoughts on or strategies on, hey, parents, this is what kids need, and this is kind of how you can just kind of release them into the world? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think at that point it really boils down to the parents being comfortable that they've They've done their best. They've really raised lovely children, and every parent is anxious about where their child is going to go and what their experiences will be like, and will people be kind to them. But the only way to learn those things is by doing.
Yeah.
So you just have to meet people who are unkind, and to feel the disappointment, and it's all just a part of life. We all get to be human that way.
Yeah, that's a tough one because you protect them as much as you can, and then all of a sudden, but you're absolutely right. The best way to do it is do it. Sheila, your thoughts on EF skills that need to be focused on for high school age kids?
Yeah, just sort of to piggyback on what Sophie was saying, I felt like high school was the time, you take the training wheels off. They're not away at college or doing out of your home. And so almost allowing them to make mistakes, because it's kind of the last time they're going to be able to do it in the safety of your purview. And so for me, which skills, I almost feel like at that point, kids have figured out what skills they want to work on and are sort of doing it themselves. They're building, like as Sam said, they're building relationships. They're starting to notice and have awareness around, oh my goodness, I never remember my friend wants to go out in the evening because my memory is terrible. So now I'm going to start utilizing a skill of putting things in a calendar on my phone or on a paper. So they're starting to kind of figure it out. And so honing in on what they're already doing or starting to do, or if you see they're missing play dates, or they're not called play dates in high school, but going out and doing things with their friends because they aren't organizing or prioritizing or planning it properly, then start building on that. Hey, if you had planned your day a little better and you had done this and this and this, you could have gone out this evening with your friends. Let's set you up for success next week. What should we do? Putting all of the responsibility on them with a few guardrails, but sort of the invisible guardrails, because you really want them to feel like by the time they finish 12th grade, they can do this on their own. And so it's really about baby stepping to independence through those 4 years to me.
No, that makes sense. And I agree with that. And the one thing I want to share is definitely consistency is key. Like my kid knows that if he does certain things, he can't earn his screen time, and vice versa. And there were many times when he is incessant, right? Like this kid has all the energy on the planet and what about now? Like, hey, what can I do to earn it back? And it takes a lot, especially at the end of a workday, to not give in. But not giving in is what sort of helped them understand that, okay, this consequence is here to stay. If not, he's constantly trying to figure out how to manipulate the system. So, and which is fine. Like I'm not the worst enemy here. It's getting out into the world. So that consistency, which is really easy to throw out the window, especially after a long day of work, I would say has been key. So yeah, thank you for that insight. By the way, just wanted to say that we are running over. This will be available on YouTube for a recording. So if you guys need to leave, go for it. But I think we're going to take a hard stop in about 10 minutes. We have a couple of more questions to go. Interestingly, it's what questions should I be asking my child's teacher? So this is not necessarily for folks who, have IEPs and 504s. A lot of us are probably have kids who are mainstreamed and maybe have a para with them, or maybe they're in private schools and got a later diagnosis. So asking or understanding questions, or understanding the type of questions to ask a teacher, I would say has been the most important thing for me to understand how my kid is doing. So help us demystify that, Sheila. We'll start with you over here.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to just communicating with them, do they have the resources they need? Do they understand the struggles? Because we call them the gray area kiddos. They don't necessarily have a diagnosis. They don't have an IEP. They don't have a 504. They're doing okay academically, but you kind of know there's something that there are areas of concern, areas of struggle, challenge areas. My middle son was like this. We could not pinpoint for the life of us what was going on. And so it was just about really drilling down to the teachers, what is working for him, what isn't working for him, what are some things I see at home that maybe the teacher doesn't see, what are some things at school that the teacher sees that I don't see at home, because that's really telling. I don't know how often we have a meeting with a parent and they say, these teachers are telling me that my kiddo's doing this and this and this. I never see that at home. And the reality of it is, at home, we sort of even unconsciously, we cater to what our kids need because we've grown accustomed to their their preferences, and so we know better than to ask them to do non-preferred tasks sometimes. And so again, at the end of the day, point of least resistance, you're not gonna kind of poke the bear when everybody's tired and grumpy. But when they're at school and they have to do the multiplication or the writing assignment, they are going to show a different side of them. And so really having that open mind and open communication with parents to ask, what are you seeing? During what time of the day are you seeing this? Is it during social interactions? Is it during math time? Is it during reading? What parts of the day? So you really hone in on what are the specific areas that the teachers may have concerns about.
Yeah,
And
no,
you just have to relationships and dialogue.
that makes sense. And sometimes when I didn't know what questions to ask, I would essentially say, hey, can I volunteer in the classroom at this hour?
Absolutely.
That's a great time to make observations, because most of the time I'm anxious about asking questions. I'm like, well, I don't want to draw attention to my kid because last year was rough. So should I even start asking anything? And my answer over there would be absolutely, because you don't want to get to the end of the year and realize there's this huge problem that could have been avoided before. And
Yeah.
you'll be shocked by, and this is not all educators, but how many teachers, they themselves are anxious about addressing it because they want to feel capable of handling it, and then it's too late. So definitely having that open relationship with the educator is gonna help a great deal. Sophie,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? You've been an educator and you've been in a unique position. So how do you think parents should handle that?
Yeah, I've been on both sides of the equation. I think assuming that you have teachers who are really in it for the right reasons and really do want to teach and to help and to grow as professionals and collaborators in this child's experience, then yes, you need to focus on building that relationship and that rapport. I mean, I suppose that goes without saying for every other sort of teacher. But if you're going to really get some mileage, that's going to be a very important thing to do. And to figure out if they're seeing things that you don't, or vice versa. Sometimes, children are really, their activity levels and their behavior might really be context specific. So you might really see very different things at home and school. And so that dialogue is going to be helpful for troubleshooting anything that comes up.
Awesome. Yeah, no, super helpful. And then one last question that we have is, what extracurricular activities can help develop skills that can be utilized in accessing education? So Sam, why don't we start off with you and then we'll go to Sophie, because I know cheerleading was big for you.
Yeah, and I have one last thing on the other question too.
Yeah, go for it.
Will you put the slide back on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Is it this one?
Okay, yeah. What question should I be asking my child's teachers? Another thing is like, instead of asking them questions, like listening to the teacher. From my experience, if my parent would have listened to what the teacher was trying to tell them versus what the parent wanted to happen, that could have gotten me a lot further. So just list the teacher's spending 8 hours with you or however many hours a day. Just take a second to listen to them and listen to how your child is functioning with them. So I just thought that that was a good point. Just listen to what the teacher is experiencing with them.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
actually, that is a very good point, because often there are positive things that I hear about my kid from the teacher, and I kind of go, are we talking about the right kid over here? Because that doesn't make sense. So I love that you're bringing up the how do they work together, because different teachers do influence your kids differently. And that's where the
uh,
flexible thinking can either really hurt you or, really work to your advantage. So I completely agree with that. Thank you for bringing that up.
you're
Um,
welcome.
and what do you think about the extracurricular activities? Like what helped you when you were going through this?
I mean, when everything is so hard, remembering all the dates in history, uh, not knowing how to spell, read, everything is falling apart, and then you have something that you are good at, and that gives you that dopamine and gives you that confidence and that self-esteem. When you can taste that and have a little piece of that, it just makes you want to get better at the things that you're not good at. So having something, whatever it is, climbing trees, cheerleading, gymnastics, MMA, whatever it is that is your thing, do it. And then send that energy when you go take that test. Think about how good you felt during that activity and bring that energy right with you. And that, I mean, that's what has worked for me. That's how I've gotten a lot accomplished. And um, yeah, and you're not alone when you're in activities. You're normally with a group of people, and that's challenging in the beginning, but it's actually more beneficial towards the end for me.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend those for self-esteem, confidence, and something that you're good at, and then sending that energy to where you're not good at it. It can excel.
I love it. And then also, yeah, sometimes my kid has weird asks, and I have learned not to shut him down and say, okay, fine, how do we cater to this? And so, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The amount of joy he gets from that is definitely something that I can't provide. So, very good point.
Mhm.
Sophie, this is what you live and breathe. So, what do you think
Yeah,
of kids over here?
I mean, Sam said it the best. All I would add, um, encourage your children to explore what is really interesting to them. What are they passionate about? Even if it's something that you might not find so engaging, there's something there for them. And I always think back to my boyfriend, what he would describe his mum. She would say to him, "Stop playing with those rockets." And now, of course, he designs and builds propulsion systems in
Ah,
aerospace and has his own aerospace company. So it can pay off in a big way to let your kids do these things.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind
And
if
then
you played with rockets, yeah.
and then also similar to what Sam said, yes, make explicit connections between this thing that your child is passionate about and the things that they're doing in school, so that maybe some of the success can transfer. Maybe they're going to reframe the way they think about stuff that's challenging at school, because chances are they're doing something that is really difficult. Even if they're successful at it, it's still very difficult work, and they're very focused, and they're doing all of these things that meet the executive function roadmap that you want them to have. They're doing it. They can do it.
Yep. And also not,
make those connections.
yeah. No, I could talk about this forever, but we're literally 1 minute away. So thank you so much. That was the end of our questions. We did get a few questions in, which we will answer on a blog post, and we will publish this video as well. If you follow us on Facebook or Instagram, you'll get all the information on where to access the blog, or you can just go to learnfully.com/blog, and it'll probably be up in maybe about a week and a half or so. So please be on the lookout for it. If you have more questions, feel free to, again, reach us on social media, and we'll do our best to get back to you. I just wanted to say thank you so much. We do run one-on-one or small group programs, and this is especially for middle and high school kids who want that camaraderie. They're strength and interest based. You can do them in person if you're in the Denver area or in Los Altos in California. And yeah, you can reach us at contact@learnfully.com. If you want to reach out to Sophie, who does a lot of parent coaching and therapy and tutoring, you have her email there. It's Sophie at compassionateba.com. And we'll be sure to post that information as well. But Sam, Sophie, Sheila, thank you so much. Really enjoyed having you guys here. And we look forward to seeing everyone next time. Thanks, everyone.
Lucy, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.